I've been wondering, you know, is atheism really an objective thing that comes out of intellectual study and finding that there is ample proof that there is no God? Or is atheism a subjective belief that comes from inner convictions subjectively? The reason I say this is because the bottom line of the atheist is always, why is there so much suffering in this world? Surely, how can God be a loving God and permit so much suffering? If that is the case, then God must be a monster, or as some say, could even be evil. And so I wondered just how objective atheism really is. When I became a Christian, and my testimony is on YouTube, it's on my website, how I became a Christian. And after I became a Christian, my experience with Christ was growing. I believe that you cannot understand God in an intellectual, scientific or philosophical way. You cannot put God in a test tube to understand him. God has to be experienced. And my experience with Christ was growing, and I was enjoying and liking what I was finding out about Christ. I read my Bible avidly. I would read as many as 30, 40, 50 chapters every day. I just couldn't get enough. I was like blotting paper, soaking it in. However, I did have one problem, and that problem was with the Old Testament. There were just too many stories in there that confused me. Stories like the flood, how God destroyed man through the flood. Sodom and Gomorrah, how God destroyed that town and all the inhabitants in it. And then, of course, the way he told Israel to destroy certain enemies, and one of the old ones that keeps coming up is the Amalekites. And of course these stories I found very distasteful, and I could not equate this Christ that I was now experiencing with the God of the Old Testament. And I found that some of these stories were quite incompatible with the Christ that I was now getting to know. Well, after 2 years, I decided that I would go to college and I would study, because I desperately needed more information. I really had not been schooled in the Christian teaching at all. I knew very little about Christianity. Most of what I knew about it seemed obnoxious to me. And now I find I'm a Christian with very little knowledge, so I decided to go to college and get as much information as I could glean. I had no intentions of going in for the Christian ministry. That was not what I was looking for. It was simply information about Christ and about Christianity. Of course, it was in college that I was forced into looking at the Old Testament and examining some of the stories that I found very, very distasteful to me. So I decided I was going to have to face these stories head on. So I began to do a bit of research. Why did God find man, and particularly the ones we've just talked about, those during the time of the flood, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, and certain people like the Amalekites, why did God find them so objectionable that he needed to judge them? What was it about them? What were they doing that would cause God, and remember the God now of the Old Testament that I'm reading about is the same Christ that I'm getting to know, who is a wonderful person. I mean, I was just thrilled by what I was discovering about my Saviour, Jesus Christ. And so I had to ask myself, what was it back there that was so objectionable to him who was here as well as being back there? Why did he take umbrage with them? Why was he so upset that he needed to judge? I want to try and put it to you in modern terms, explain from modern times. Look at this. That's supposed to be a 1. Is that the way you spell it? I hope. What does that name mean to you? Adolf Hitler. He was a despot that rose and threatened the world, and so countries like the United Kingdom and other people joined in, like the United States of America. We decided that this man must not be allowed to take control. He was considered to be an evil man, and so it was decided by the Western world, we must not allow this man to conquer the world. So what did we do? We went to war. We flew planes across to Germany, we bombed them. Well, they also did the same thing to us. But we bombed them. Men, women and children died. But we considered that we were justified in fighting because this man was a tyrant. This man was wicked. Okay? One more now. Not sure about my spelling. I'm just hoping I'm right. Saddam Hussein, another dictator, this time from Iraq. And the West, mainly England and America, George Bush and Tony Blair decided that this man was a wicked man and that it would be better if he was removed as ruler, as leader of Iraq. And so we went to war. And I always remember that first night we went to war, the bombs were sent over Baghdad, I believe. Men, women and children were killed. Many more people have died since. Many of our troops have died. There's been a lot of death and bloodshed over in Iraq. But we considered that we were justified in what we did because Saddam Hussein was a bad man and it was better if he was put out of the way. Okay, one more. Osama bin Laden. You've all heard of him, and now recently a team of SEALs from the USA went over and killed him, knocked him out of the way, blew him into the next world. But of course we all feel that it was justified because Osama bin Laden was a bad man and he was behind the 9/11 atrocities, killed many thousand on that day, over 3,000 people died. So we considered ourselves to be justified in shedding this man's blood in judgment, bearing in mind, for the atrocities that he had committed. One more. Again, I don't know about the spelling. Oh, Gaddafi. G, that's a D. No, I don't know if it's a double F. I'll just put one for now. Gaddafi. There may be two F's, I'm not too sure. I can't guarantee. Now, currently, at the time of this video, we are at war with Libya. And we are sending planes over there that are striking, sending bombs, blowing people up. Men, women and children will die as a result of our bombs, our bombardment of Libya. However, we feel justified in bringing judgment upon Gaddafi because he's a bad man, he's an evil man and he's doing cruel and wicked things. And so in all these cases, and there are far more than this, but I've just picked on 4 cases: Adolf Hitler, Saddam Hussein, Osama bin Laden and Gaddafi. We have seen fit to bring judgment upon these regimes, even though it meant that many people would die, men, women and children. We are still, or we feel that we are justified in doing this and bringing our judgment upon bad regimes because we don't want them spreading throughout the world. So we feel that we must curtail these kind of men. Okay? Now what's coming? We do not afford God the same privilege of bringing judgment upon evil people. It says during the original flood that God repented that he'd made man because man's ways were continually evil. It was the same about Sodom and Gomorrah. God came down, he said, I'm going to look and see if the reports I've heard of this place accurate reports. Where were the reports coming from? They were coming from Lot. He said, Lot's spirit was grieved because of the iniquity, the sin in Sodom and Gomorrah, and he cried out day and night to God to do something about it. So it says that God came down to see if what Lot was saying was true, and decided it was, and decided he would bring judgment. And so it goes on through the scriptures. At a time when man was wicked, God said, I must stop this wickedness from spreading. I must curtail this. I will bring my judgment. So why is it that we complain about God's judgment? After all, he is a holy and righteous God. When we ourselves bring into effect similar judgments upon regimes on this earth, and we are quick to judge them, and we are quick to bring slaughter, we are quick to kill as a result of our judgment upon those regimes. But we shake a fist at God when he dares to bring wicked men to book. Now, it seems to me to be very, very unfair here. There is no objective judgment in this. I recently heard an argument by an atheist who was saying that in order to have objective moral values, we really don't need God. We are quite capable of making our own objective moral values. And the basis that we can make those objective moral values is simply that we do not want to hurt one another. And so therefore we will create a morality, moral values, in order not to hurt people. Well, frankly, that's a load of piffle. Because as we look back over history and we see what's going on today, we can clearly see that society is not in a position to be able to say we don't want to hurt one another, because we continually do it all the time. And so we could never have reliable objective values from that basis. Surely our objective moral values could only be reliable if they came from a higher source. I want to finish by telling you a little story. A woman in Texas was arrested by the police and dragged in front of the courts, and her little daughter was removed from the family home and taken into care. Now, what on earth did she do to warrant this? Oh, well, what she did, she decided that her daughter was being a little bit too naughty, so she spanked her. That's all she did. There was no suggestion of anything too heavy or anything brutal. She just gave her daughter a motherly spanking for being naughty. So the daughter was then removed from the home, put into care, and the woman taken before the court and put on probation. Now I ask you, when you think of the pain and the anguish that that little girl will be going through right now, being separated from the family, it will be far worse than the chastisement that was inflicted upon her by her mother. And not only will the little girl be going through a lot of pain and anguish, but also the mother will be going through pain and anguish also. Right. So this society that has suddenly decided we cannot spank our children, in their wisdom, and they've made it a crime, almost a crime to do so, just remember this, that this same society has killed over 53 million babies through abortion. This society, who says you cannot spank your children anymore, has been responsible for the deaths of 53 million babies because of abortion. Now, this was one of the problems that God found with those people back there. And this was one of the reasons, killing children, that he decided to bring judgment. Do we think for 1 minute that God will not bring judgment, justified judgment upon our generation for such things? I think he will be very, very justified in doing so. Have a good week. Bye for now.